let's talk a little bit about WEC.
I'd be happy to.
I know you would. CT Stud.
Yes.
I looked for my car. I don't know what I've done with my. I probably lent it out to somebody and have it because I wanted to come and I wanted to read. I remember in the church in Richmond you were talking about in a prayer meeting one night. I read out because it really challenged me. I think that book, more than anything else, really did something in my life as C.T. Stud, where he talks about nailing, very graphically, nailing your colours to the mast. And but of course he was a professional cricketer, had quite a lot of money for those days, gave it all up and went out to Africa, and of course not necessarily to start WEC, but of course WEC, the Worldwide Evangelization Crusade, has come about after. Tell us a little bit about that, how it's developed and some of the ethos of WEC today.
Yes, C.T. Stud went to China first with Hudson Taylor as one of the Cambridge Seven, and then spent a time, well, he came back from China ill, so he went off next really to Uttarakhand in South India to be a chaplain to the British garrison. And being a well-known cricketer, he went down to bomb there. Yeah. But he was in the hills, so he was relatively healthy. Then he came back to Africa, to Britain, and he was described as a museum of diseases. And in his 50s, he went to a meeting which said cannibals want missionaries, which tickled his fancy, and he went off.
To be on the menu.
Well, hopefully not, but I mean certainly to do something with it. To the centre of Africa, to what he called the Heart of Africa mission. And it then became known, well, he was always writing these little pamphlets, booklets. One was called Christ's Etceteras. It says there are all sorts of other people doing wonderful work around the world, but we're the sort of camp followers, the people who sort of mop up afterwards. We're going to be the Christ's Etceteras to come in and do the rest of the work. And that became the Worldwide Evangelization Crusade. We changed the name actually in about 30 years ago.
I haven't caught up with you yet.
It's now just WEC International.
That's right. Yeah.
In which WEC stands for Worldwide Evangelization for Christ.
Okay.
So we do that. And that's partly because the issue of the Crusades is a particularly painful one for people from a Muslim background.
Right, I understand.
And we want to bring good news to Muslims, and that's a lot of what we're doing now. We have about, coming up for 2,000 people worldwide working with WEC. Our sending bases in the West are not particularly growing now.
When you mean sending bases, you mean places like here in
the UK,
Britain
the
America,
US, Canada, yes. Switzerland, Germany.
Yes, they're not.
Australia,
in other words, they're
Zealand.
not. People aren't coming and saying, "I want to go overseas."
We do, to a certain extent, but we have had a dropping number of people coming and applying. The big growth points are Korea. We simply have not got the mechanism to process the number of people in Korea who want to join WEC. Brazil, and we're just now starting to send out missionaries from Mexico. Right. These are the places where people line up, and I have to say, the Koreans are extraordinary. They will take a theological degree. They will then become pastors. They then have to join WEC, you have to learn English.
Right.
Korea is a very monocultural society. There isn't anybody except Koreans there. So they don't come across people of other cultures at all, really, in Korea. But they have to learn English to join WEC. I met somebody this year in southern Russia. He speaks wonderful English. He's Korean. He'd gone short-term to Guinea-Bissau, where he had to learn Creole. He's now learning Russian, and then he'll learn another language. These Koreans are serious about world evangelization.
Right. Just before we go, Is there a reason, or has WEC International,
Thank you.
to give it its proper title, as I haven't given it so far, have they come across it reasoning? Is it because of the state of the church, while the Western nations are declining in people going and these other countries are? Is it the state of the gospel we listen to? Is it the state of apathy, or up until recently, of course, which is really being shaken, the whole area of money and finances and the comforts of that? Have you really sort of sought to work out why the change has taken place?
I'll just say Jason Mandrick, who's the author of Operation World now, the new edition.
Yes.
Patrick Johnston has done the editions up to now, but Jason, in a young leaders conference in Singapore, was talking about the state of the gospel. And his first comment was, the gospel's fine. So there's no problem there.
Right.
But yes, we certainly do look at things and say, why is it that we're not getting recruits in the Western nations? I think one has to say, to a certain extent, it is that the church is not really as lively. There isn't as much commitment to God, generally speaking, as there are in some places. And I think, to a certain extent, we have to say, the church is getting tired in some of these countries.
Really? What do you mean by that, Andrew?
We've had evangelical Christianity in this country for a couple of hundred years, if not more. Well, I mean, probably since the Reformation in some form or another. And people are just getting used to going to church, that the church will always be there, that we'll run alpha courses, that we'll replace those we lose by new people coming in, and we'll just tick over. But that sort of fire that gets into people who, well, particularly people who encounter Jesus for the first time. I mean, if you meet somebody who's just become a Christian, it's difficult to shut them up, or to, because if they're not telling you the gospel, they're telling you how many other people they told the gospel, and how they're bringing other people to know Jesus.
Right.
So it's wonderful that when that happens, but that can either be sat on or it just goes off the boil. And I think in some places around the world where either there hasn't been that history or the enthusiasm for the gospel is still red hot, then there are people who want to go out and do something. Is it time for me to talk about the Chinese yet?
I wonder the last time when anybody prayed, Lord, send forth labourers into your harvest. The fields are white unto harvest. That used to be something we'd hear all the time. But the labourers are few. Pray ye therefore that the Lord of the harvest. When was the last time that happened? Should we be doing it? You let us know as far as that. While Andrew talks about China.
But before I do,
before you do,
I want to say the
develop
24/7 prayer movement has really developed along that line.
Yes.
It started with, I don't think it's just Pete Gregg and his little group, but various groups who said, we do need to pray more. Let's set ourselves to pray 24/7. And they did that. And as you do that, it is inevitable. You will catch the heart of God.
Yeah.
And as a result, people linked with the 24/7 prayer movement are now working in various places around the world because they have caught something of the heart of God for other nations and other people who are suffering, who've lost out, or who haven't had the opportunity to hear about Jesus. I mean, Pete Gregg often talks about this. There's a girl in Mexico, and absolutely horrendous situation. But because she saw how God loved the people in that place, she got herself there and has been ministering to people in a most extraordinary way. But it's true, if you pray, if you want to catch the heart of God, you will also catch the fact that he wants to bring people to himself from all over the world.